The mid-14th century marked a period of great change for the people of the Balkans. Since the migration of the Slavs, almost a millennia earlier, Romans and Slavs lived in a state of coexistence. Although this relationship endlessly flip-flopped between warring enemies to trade partners, a kind of balance had been reached between all parties by the late Middle Ages, with everyone equally partaking in Christianity and the feudal European lifestyle. And then, on the backs of flea-ridden rats on merchant ships, arrived the Black Death. It hit Constantinople via the eastern trade routes in 1347, killing as many as half the Romans, there and in surrounding areas. This erased the partial demographic recovery achieved in the last 100 years under the Roman Palaeologan emperors, which may have barely brought Constantinople back into the six figures in terms of population after being completely sacked by the Latins in 1204. Nikephoros Grigoras, who lived through the ordeal within the Theodosian walls, wrote, "The living were not enough to bury the dead. Corpses lay piled in the streets, and the city became a tomb for its own citizens." Other Eastern Roman urban sites, such as Thessaloniki, were equally devastated, including the island dwellings. Similarly, the Bulgarians, also living in large urban centers, were affected deeply via their Black Sea ports in the following year. It's estimated of about 3 million Bulgarians, 1 million were claimed as victims of the Black Death. By the 1350s, it reached Serbia, claiming lives indiscriminately and sapping manpower just like it did to Bulgarians and Eastern Romans. The ability of Roman and Bulgarian emperors to project power had already been waning in this decade, leaving areas of non-governance. With the plague rampantly culling Balkan populations by 1350, imperial authority further retracted toward the capitals of Tarnovo and Constantinople as the ability to tax subjects, recruit warriors, and enforce vassalage diminished. The stress experienced by these two feudal societies was now approaching institution-breaking levels with the advent of the plague. The Roman Emperor had already delegated military responsibilities to migrating Turks from Anatolia, assigning multiple major battles to Anatolian beys. As the situation reached cataclysm, the shadow of one of these Anatolian tribes finally reached the Balkans. While Balkan societies were struggling against the Black Death in the 1350s, the Turkic Anatolian tribes managed to pass through the ordeal less affected. In 1351, John VI Cantacuzene granted one of these tribes, the Ottoman Beylik, land on the peninsula of Gallipoli, more specifically, the small fortress of Tsimpe at the entrance of the peninsula. This holding was exchanged for Suleiman Pasha's service to the emperor, as the large Ottoman manpower was used by Constantinople in the short term, culminating in the first Ottoman holding on the European continent. In the following year, Suleiman Pasha with 10,000 Ottoman cavalry fought on behalf of an imperial claimant to defeat a combined force of mainly Serbians and some Bulgarians, who also represented a rival claimant. The Ottoman victory raised alarms throughout the Balkans, in the Bulgarian and Serbian courts especially. 3 years later, just after the peak of the Black Death, an earthquake devastated Gallipolis, the largest city in Gallipoli, still suffering from recurring outbreaks of the plague. When the Roman survivors completely evacuated, the Ottomans took the opportunity to occupy the largest city and fortress along with the entire peninsula. The Black Death in combination with the Gallipoli earthquake were almost cosmically orchestrated events meant to boost the Ottomans into Europe. The earthquake made the Romans abandon Gallipolis, the largest nearby major Roman fortified site, allowing the Ottomans to move in quickly with no fight. Otherwise, it's likely the Ottomans, still lacking siege warfare expertise, would have had a very high difficulty taking the city. As for the plague, the Eastern Romans would have had the strength to prevent the Ottomans outright from crossing the sea into Gallipoli in the first place had it not occurred. Regardless, both globally improbable events did occur and in quick succession, and once the emerging Ottomans consolidated Gallipoli, they had the perfect springboard into the rest of Thrace, which they were otherwise already familiar with due to their service to the emperor. Having the background of traditional Turkic nomads, the Ottomans were an emerging power which retained their frontier raiding tradition. As such, annual forces of light cavalry armed in the standard light horse archer model could be relied on to keep the pressure on the frontier regions. In 1355, Suleiman Pasha, son of Orhan Gazi, once again raised the war plume and assembled several thousand men of these young frontier raiders intent on continuing the Ottoman momentum as far into Europe as possible by probing the limits of their new staging ground. Since the Ottomans were already familiar with the Aegean and Black Sea coasts, their Pasha naturally followed the inward path of the Maritsa River, leading them first to the Roman fortified settlement of Adrianople, easily circumvented through the Thracian plain, and next into Bulgarian territory, bypassing a second settlement, the third largest Bulgarian city at the time, called Plovdiv to the Bulgarians, but Philippopolis to the Greeks. Here, the Thracian plain converged into a natural exit in the west, an exit blocked at its confluence by a large Bulgarian city. Known today as Sofia, but then as Sredets, this city was maybe fourth or fifth largest in the Bulgarian Tsar's domain, with an estimated population of slightly more than 10,000, and Tsar Ivan Alexander asked his eldest, the Prince Michael IV Asen, to intercept the Pasha while he traveled. Vaguely described as beholding all of the virtues, it's hinted the Bulgarian prince was favored by his king and his subjects. Suleiman Pasha and his raiders approached the last small plain before the mountain pass into Sredets. In the center of this plain, serving as a roadside and agricultural hub, lay Ihtiman, a small feudal village. Here waited the prince, at the head of a quickly assembled force. Although total manpower available to the Bulgarians was severely limited by disease, the Tsardom still had a robust military system emanating from the Tsar's heavy cavalry and infantry extending to the boyar class and their local retinues and levies. The heavy cavalry retinue of the prince would not have exceeded 1,000, considering haste of assembly, while the nearby available heavy infantry would not have exceeded an estimated 2,500 heavily armed and armored spearmen, swordsmen, and militia, supplemented by archers and even crossbowmen. Conversely, Ottoman military theory in this era relied on the horse archer light cavalry type, often supplemented by smaller light infantry detachments for logistics and flexibility. The Akinji horse archer was the dominant cavalry troop on the Ottoman side, numbering around 2,000, followed by Ghazi or Azap bow-armed foot soldiers of less than 1,000. The Ottomans employed steppe-style tactics and strategy, similar to the Bulgarians a millennia earlier before they became a sedentary society. In this style, the greater mobility, speed, and ranged combat abilities of the Turkish horse archer were utilized to harass an enemy force at range until formations broke and opportunities presented themselves for a decisive blow. If enemy formations failed to break, then the Ottomans would purposefully charge and flee, hoping to eat casualties in exchange for enemy pursuit. Although we do not know whether by arrow or sword, we are told that in one of these clashes, the Bulgarian prince and heir, Michael IV Asen, was killed in combat. We also know that the Ottomans withdrew following the clash, indicating their own casualties or change in situation. From a purely tactical standpoint, the fight was indecisive. However, strategically, the loss of a strong Bulgarian heir during this time of crisis was a major blow to the Bulgarians, not easily recoverable from. Further, the battle's occurrence deep in Bulgarian territory signaled a waning ability by the Tsar to properly defend his southern frontier, finding himself in a situation similar to the Romans, where the Black Death had diminished state power significantly.